What's up, guys? It's the real main event, the Rogue Soldier, the essential John L. Crossfire.
And I'm Mrs. Crossfire.
And once again, you guys are tuned into Caught
in Conversation. Shakalaka-laka.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to episode 70 of Caught in Conversation. As always, I am your host, the essential John L. Crossfire, back riding solo this week, back to some sort of normality, of course. Mrs. Crossfire is now in the intro, and she will hopefully be appearing more frequently, as you've probably gathered in the last couple of episodes that she's been a part of. And of course, I couldn't do any of this without hers, and of course, all of your support as well. I am very excited for this week's episode. I've been putting it together for a little bit now, honestly, for the better part of about 4 to 5 months, amongst life and health and all the fun stuff. And for those that are wondering about a health update, my eyesight, it's currently at a standstill. It's unlikely to improve any further until I can get the stitches out, but it's good enough to at least try and read my notes, even if it is painful at times. But of course, if you have read the thumbnail or the description of this episode, you would have seen that this episode, I am doing a countdown of the top 10 matches in the career of the game, the Cerebral Assassins, the King of King, the one and only Triple H. I haven't put anything else in this episode, as my notes are pretty deep for this one, so I figured I'll get to the point as quick as I can. I did originally start working on this episode back just about March, just before WrestleMania 38, when Triple H first announced his retirement from in-ring competition. And of course, due to, the cardiac issues that he was having, and then at WrestleMania 38, he did do the symbolic thing where he came out and he left his boots in the ring. And I have watched Lord knows how many matches, as well as had a lot already stored away in this big old filthy mark brain of mine, and I am pretty happy with what I have come up with. I'm hoping I can get through this. It's about 6:30 Saturday morning. As I record this, I've had about 2 hours sleep. I have a bottle of water in front of me. I haven't had any caffeine yet, so hopefully I can manage to keep this episode entertaining for you, because, as I said, I have put a lot of work into this. Of course, as always, if you do disagree or agree with any of these or the order of them, feel free to hit me up on all the social medias or comment below if you're using the Podbean app, and just let me know what your thoughts and opinions are. Let's have a friendly debate, discussion. Let's get caught in conversation together. But that's the whole reason that I did start this podcast, was to have a platform to kind of just broaden these types of discussions and just mark out together. In a weird way, though, the timing of this episode, it actually couldn't have came at a better time. Although, as I said, I have been working on this since about WrestleMania. Triple H, he's been in charge for a couple of months now in the WWE, and he has definitely made a big statement, in that position in a very short amount of time. And obviously I've talked about that with Mrs. Crossfire here on the pod, and we've fantasy booked and marked out and yada, yada, yada. But thus far, just the recap, we've seen a handful of returns. We've seen Hit Row, Dakota Kai, Dexter Lumis, Karrion Kross, of course, Scarlett by side, with Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae, just to name a few, of course, Braun Strowman as well. And there's lots of teasers as I record this of the White Rabbit, which myself and Mrs. Crossfire did discuss in last week's episode, where lots of teasers that it might be Bray Wyatt. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty more where that came from in terms of returns and just shuffling the roster around in general. It's probably going to take, honestly, 6 to 12 months before we really get the bigger picture of, what Triple H is trying to do. But so far, so good. I'm really enjoying Raw and SmackDown, since Triple H took over. As I said, it's all been good, so I guess that's kind of redundant to point that out. But I'm really looking forward to NXT dropping the 2.0, and they've got the new white and gold logo. And again, myself and Mrs. Crossfire briefly glossed over it last week, where it's going to be like a hybrid now of the black and gold era and the 2.0 era. And Extreme Rules is looking like an absolute stacked card already with I think they've got 6 matches that are announced now, and I'm intrigued by all of them. And huge news came out, just a few days ago as I record this. WWE in Australia, the network here is going to go the same way as the US. We're not going to have the network in a few months' time. It's going to be merging with Foxtel / Binge and KO. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I mean, the network's app works like absolute crap for me, and I know a lot of my wrestling friends have issues with it constantly. So in a way, I still hope we don't lose any content or much content gets censored like it has over in the US on Peacock, but I am excited to hopefully have it at least work a little bit better and have maybe a bit of a better interface, because the network, I know, has been an issue for some people at times, despite the fact that, there is just an absolute abundance of amazing material on there. But thanks to those of you that did reach out and you hit me up with your opinion on the best Triple H match and your personal favourites as well. I will sprinkle them in throughout this episode. And the first person that hit me up before anyone else on this episode was Samuel, of course. Samuel, shout out to Samuel. He's always throwing out ideas for the pod, and as of late has been tuning into most of my Twitch streams. And of course I say as of late, but as I record this, I haven't streamed in about 2 weeks, but you get what I meant. Samuel says, Reign of Terror aside, Triple H was at his best in general during the Ruthless Aggression era, and as an all-round performer. And honestly, I agree with that. From about 2002, maybe 03, and, right up until his WWE Championship run in 2008, into the PG era in 2009, Triple H was probably at best above, most people on the roster when you factor in, psychology, storytelling, in-ring, yada, yada, yada. Just my opinion, but yes, Samuel seems to agree. He says that Samuel says that his favourite Triple H match is actually Triple H versus Booker T at WrestleMania 19. Now, the ending to that match, still a bit of a controversial opinion. A lot of people, including myself, feel like Booker T should have won that match, but honestly, it is still a very underrated match in my opinion, so good mention there, Samuel. My mate Dolan says Triple H versus John Cena at WrestleMania 22. He didn't specify whether he thought it was the best or whether it was his favourite. Perhaps it was both. But as I said, I haven't really got anything else to cover on today's episode, so I'm going to quickly go into the Song of the Week, and then we'll get into it even deeper. The Song of the Week this week is Ace of Spades by Motorhead. Of course, you can't have a Triple H themed episode without some Motorhead, especially the voice of the one and only Lemmy. Triple H has had a bunch of great theme songs over the years, of course, The Game, King of Kings, and Line in the Sand, all by Motorhead. And Ace of Spades, arguably the most iconic Motorhead song, besides maybe, Triple H's The Game theme song, at least, the latter is especially iconic amongst wrestling fans anyhow. But the Song of the Week this week is Ace of Spades by Motorhead. Caught in Conversation alumni and ICW Australia Hall of Famer High Octane rode into the show, and he was torn between Triple H versus Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam 2002 and Triple H versus Cactus Jack at Royal Rumble 2000. Two very great matches there. Micah, aka Mike O'Neill, also said Triple H versus Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam 2002 for him is the best Triple H match. But with that being said, I'm going to get in now, and I'm going to start counting down, and I'll sprinkle some more of those in as I go. But ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? No. I said, are you ready? Now, if you haven't seen these matches for whatever reason, there is going to be a huge spoiler alert on all of these. But as I said, we're going to get straight into it. I got a lot of notes. So kicking off this list at number 10 is Triple H versus Hulk Hogan at Backlash 2002. Now, this was Triple H's first title defense after defeating Chris Jericho for the then WWF Championship, the Undisputed Championship of that, a few weeks prior, maybe about a month prior, at WrestleMania 18. And yes, I said WWF. Fun fact, this Backlash pay-per-view that Triple H versus Hulk Hogan took place at was actually the last ever pay-per-view under the WWF banner before it became WWE. And of course, Judgment Day 2002, first ever pay-per-view under the WWE banner. The more you know. Just had to throw that in there. Now, some people may scoff that, a Hulk Hogan match has made it to the list, especially Hulk Hogan in the year 2000. But honestly, regardless of any feelings that people might have, about the man behind the character and his limited wrestling ability, whatever the fuck that means, he was no doubt a tremendous worker, hence why he was on top for so long, and that's just a fact no matter how you look at it. Straight out the gate, you have the fans hot for Hulk Hogan, who has just turned babyface after his match against The Rock back at WrestleMania 18 as well. He's shed the black and white of the NWO. He's back to donning the iconic red and yellow that Hulk still to this day is known for. Hulkamania's running wild, dude! This came about in storyline because Vince McMahon wanted to handpick the very best challenger he possibly could to give the fans exactly what they want, which kind of made no sense in a way because Vince was still a heel at this time, but You got to work a way around to, pop those ratings, brother. Unfortunately for Triple H, this meant he had to kind of, his work cut out for him, as it was a very, face versus face dynamic, with Hogan obviously being leaps and bounds more over of the two, and they didn't really want to turn Triple H heel at that point because he'd just returned from that huge quadricep injury. Of course, it was the first of two career-threatening quad injuries that Triple H would have, so they wanted to milk that just a little bit longer. Triple H definitely holds his own here against, the Hulkster, though, in that regard. Although the Hogan fans were much louder, the Triple H fans were still very much present. Triple H does a tremendous job. Triple H does a tremendous job of holding the match together, dare I say, carrying the match, and Hogan obviously does his part very well too. And as I said, Hogan, tremendous worker in terms of psychology, whether people like it or not, brother. There's an absolutely fantastic video package leading into this match if you're watching it on the WWE Network. After you go back to the actual Triple H versus Hulk Hogan timestamp, just rewind it a couple of minutes for whatever reason. The video, when you click on the chapter, it takes you to the actual entrances. So rewind it just a little bit and watch the video package before you watch the match. But just absolutely fantastic work. It really does a great job of, highlighting Triple H's return but then in a way it almost does paint him as somewhat of an underdog heading into this match with Hulk Hogan here. And as I said, Hogan very much the bigger face of the two. Triple H, though, still gets a great reaction when he comes out. As the match went on, Triple H did start to get some noticeable more boos as he dissects the knee of Hulk Hogan, who, of course, has had knee injuries of his own, in his own right. And, of course, it's just after Triple H has come back from the quad injury, so it's like, well, that's a bit of a dick move because you know what it feels like. But, it's wrestling. It's emotion. Hulk Hogan, to his credit, he gets a lot of slack, but I truly believe that, honestly, the matches that Hulk Hogan had from, the early 2000s up to, like, 05 with the match against Shawn Michaels, and even the match he had in 06 with Randy Orton, some of the best matches that he had possibly ever. You could argue that, maybe he was carried, but he did a great job of adapting, the 80s style with the modern style, if you will, at that time. We had interference from Chris Jericho. As stated, Triple H was the one that defeated Jericho for the title. And then Jericho would go on to have a bit of a mini feud with Hogan after this as well. Then we get more interference, this time from The Undertaker, who was the number one contender for the title at the next pay-per-view in Judgment Day. But after what was eventually the second Hogan leg drop of the match, Hulk Hogan actually defeats Triple H to become the new Undisputed Champion. But Triple H still looks strong in defeat, brother. Both men shake hands after the match. I didn't go into much detail with that match because, honestly, a lot of it does play into fan reaction that makes it so good. It's almost like a Hogan Rock situation, which is interesting because, it's right off the back of that match. But that's my number 10, Hulk Hogan versus Triple H, or Triple H versus Hulk Hogan at Backlash 2002. Number 9 on this list is versus John Cena at WrestleMania 22. Now, this was a really weird time in the WWE because after being a huge fan favorite for the past year or so, he's been on top as the WWE champion. This is really where the dynamic of John Cena was really starting to change. And this is where the Let's Go Cena sucks chants really started to creep in. They had a quick clip of the WrestleMania 22 press conference rather than a full-blown video package. And the short and sweet video package actually really worked perfectly here. Because basically, John Cena is the WWE champion, but going into it, he is actually the underdog going in against the super heel Triple H, which was strangely getting support, though, from the traditional wrestling fans, if you will. And it's actually an interesting contrast when you look at this match and the Hogan-Triple H match that I just mentioned. But this was the first of what would become a staple for Triple H with his somewhat, elaborate WrestleMania entrances. Of course, he'd had a few performances live by Motorhead, at this point, but this was the first where he had the whole King of Kings get up and the throne and, the infamous throne. And then John Cena as well as his, Chicago, gangster entrance. And people will remember that CM Punk, of all people, was actually an extra for this entrance before winning Money in the Bank in his WrestleMania debut the next year. But yeah, the boos are very heavy for John Cena in his entrance here. And a lot of people, including a young 11-year-old me, thought that Triple H easily had this match in the bag, despite losing it, the previous two WrestleManias. The commentary team, Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler, do a beautiful job of telling the story here of the fans almost being in, bizarro word, as I said, because of, the reaction of Triple H strangely having the support. Cena, still had his fans there, but the boos very, very noticeable. Cena being pelted with chants of "you can't wrestle" and even a few chants of "fuck you, Cena" were thrown in there. Triple H doing the dastardly thing of low-blowing both John Cena and the referee and using his trademark sledgehammer, still gets cheered despite being the dastardly heel. When Cena does kick out of that, however, the cheers on his side do slowly start to become a lot more noticeable. The fans in general really buying into the drama, and even more so when Triple H kicks out of the attitude adjustment, or the FU, as it was known as then. The finish to this match is still one of my personal favourites to a match in general when done well, and Triple H does a brilliant job of playing the part where, you've got the big, long, drawn-out submission. He almost passes out. He manages to hold on, but in the end, he still has no choice. He taps out anyway. And despite the heavy boos that Cena had gotten earlier in the night, he actually does get a pretty good pop towards the end of the match here. Again, Triple H, a master of getting his opponents over and even himself in defeat. And of course, Cena, definitely carried his weight in his own right. Number 8 is versus Ric Flair at Survivor Series 2005 in a last man standing match. Again, common theme, great video package leading into this, showing how the rivalry has gotten so personal. It is shortened to the point, though. Its main focus is, kind of showing the highlights from the cage match that the two guys did have a month prior to this. Triple H, well documented, a lifelong Ric Flair fan. Dare you say Ric Flair, the hero of Triple H growing up and getting into the business. But here in kayfabe land, Triple H as the slimy heel, he's let all his greed and his hunger consume him. And it's almost, basically his life goal to surpass Ric Flair as the dirtiest player of the game. These two men, founding members of Evolution, which of course, that's where they brought in a young Randy Orton and a young Batista, where they dominated for a couple of years before this as a faction. Triple H had decided that Ric Flair had become a shell of himself, and he wanted to put him down. And once again, the commentary team, especially Joey Styles in this situation, did a fantastic job of conveying everything across. In a way, this shift of aggression for Triple H is what would really push him for the aforementioned WrestleMania match with John Cena that I was just talking about. Of course, it happened a few months after this. Triple H jumpstarts this match by attacking Ric Flair on the entranceway before Ric Flair can even get out of his trademark entrance robe. Flair is able to quickly turn the tide, though, and it's almost instantly spills over into the crowd. Flair shows a lot of aggression that he genuinely hadn't shown in a while, which made the storyline even more realistic and believable. Flair showing that, at that point he could indeed still go. And this one does get a little bit violent. At one point, Triple H is stabbing Ric Flair in the face with a screwdriver, and of course Ric Flair dons the proverbial crimson mask. Ric Flair's signature platinum blonde white hair has turned red from the blood, of course. Ric Flair, a master of the art of getting colour. There's a spot that pops me every time I see it, with Triple H talking trash to Flair on the mic, and then Ric Flair grabs a hand of the old family jewels, but Triple H just busts the microphone over Ric Flair's head to break it up. Triple H took a very scary table bump in this one. Flair backdropped him from one announce table to the other, and Triple H very narrowly avoided landing on the back of his neck on the first table that they were standing on the way down. Flair focuses on the lower region of Triple H's body, constantly doing damage to the groinal area and then the legs. Flair, of course, very well versed in the figure four leg lock, which pretty sound strategy in theory when it's a match where you're trying to stop your opponent from being able to stand. This strategy works even better with the real-life history of Triple H's knee injuries. Triple H taps out while in the figure four, but of course that does nothing in this type of matchup. This overall is a very underrated last man standing match, just in general, in my opinion, with, of course, both these guys, Ric Flair, Triple H, masters of psychology. It's not one of the most memorable last man standing match, but when you watch it back, you really realize just how well, it was done. Ric Flair manages to get to his feet after 2 pedigrees from Triple H. Flair flips Triple H off, which pisses Triple H off, and then after a 3rd pedigree and the trademark sledgehammer to the back of the head, Flair is unable to get up, and your winner and the last man standing is Triple H. Triple H does, the motion. He symbolizes shooting Ric Flair, which, putting him out of his misery, the old jealous story. And the commentators, again, brilliant job of conveying basically just what a human piece of garbage Triple H's character is. Or as Jim Ross would say, if he was able to be on commentary here, he would have been like, that rat bastard, the game. But match number 7 versus Shawn Michaels, Royal Rumble 2004. Last man standing match. Back-to-back last man standing matches here on this list. Was definitely not, intentional, but it is what it is. First and foremost, I did actually watch this on DVD. Remember those? Because for whatever reason, the WWE Network has dueling English and Spanish audio at the same time for this event, and my ADHD just could not handle it. Like, I was trying to hyper-focus on the wrestling in the video package, and it just... I don't know, if I understood Spanish, it wouldn't be as big as an issue, but yeah, it was just really throwing me off. But once again, another fantastic video package. This one documenting the original D-Generation X in the mid to late 90s, all the way through the Shawn Michaels, momentous return in 2002 after missing 4 years due to, his well-known back injury. And the story is that Triple H has a chip on his shoulder after feeling that he was feeling like a sidekick to Shawn Michaels back in the day. And he feels that, over the years, he earned his way to the top of the mountain just for Shawn to come back and then, steal the limelight all over again. And these two have battled in many different matches, including an unsanctioned match, which was Shawn's actual return. They were the last two men remaining in the first ever Elimination Chamber and had just come off the back of a beautiful 3 stages of Hell match leading into this. Of course, those 3 stages being Hardcore, Steel Cage, and a ladder match, respectively. Shawn Michaels, much like Triple H, had idolized Ric Flair, and the first count of the match comes after Shawn actually uses the figure 4 leg lock on Triple H to rub it in. Of course, Ric Flair, Triple H, best buds at this point, Evolution's, strong as ever during this time period. Shawn Michaels gets some beautiful color in this match after putting himself through the Spanish announce table with a missed Acai moonsault. Triple H moves out of the way and then goes to work dissecting Shawn. Triple H screams at Shawn to stay down, but Shawn taunts him to bring it before both men start exchanging strikes. They go back and forth with Shawn showing signs of a second wind. Shawn kips up while both men are down to defiantly break his side of the count. And this whole match is really just one big brawl with both men just kind of getting their shit in, brother, here and there. Triple H gets some great color in his own right. Triple H hits the pedigree. Shawn just manages to get to his feet at 9, but then Shawn manages to hit Sweet Chin Music, but he's lost too much blood to capitalize. Triple H retains the championship by way of a draw. After the super kick, neither men are able to make their way to their feet, and both men are stretched out as the fans show their displeasure of Triple H still retaining the championship on a technicality. Shawn does try to walk out on his own feet, but does need the referees to keep him steady. And then Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler just tell a beautiful picture of everything that we've just witnessed. They do a great job. Absolutely fantastic stuff, in my opinion. And now I said that the Ric Flair and Triple H Roman is a very underrated one. This, hands down, is one of the best last man standing, and the best last man standing match in a lot of other people's eyes, even with the draw being the result. It just goes to show, if, you can have a great story and a great match, you don't always have to have a clean win. But I know a lot of people, myself included, would definitely prefer to have a clean win. But yeah, the story here, this match ending in a draw, if anything, made it better in a weird way. Match number 6 versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 17. Shout out to the Muzdog. He said that this is the best Triple H match slash his favorite Triple H match. This was the first of 2 times for Triple H being played to the ring by Motorhead live in person, and I personally still get goosebumps watching this back when they take the stage and Lemmy proclaims, "We are Motorhead, and we'll kick your ass." Taker's entrance in this one's freaking awesome too. He's in full-blown, full swing in the American Badass gimmick, and the stage as long as hell. So he just opens up the bike that he's riding, and it just sounds so damn sexy. And I know that one back in the day, you know, when my dad was still around and he watched that, I know he marked out, you know, when he saw that. It's got nothing to do with the match, but it's my podcast. I just have a habit of getting sentimental on here. But once again, we had a great video package. It was short and sweet, but very effective. Showed how Stephanie McMahon, or McMahon Helmsley as she was known in kayfabe at this point, she has a restraining order against The Undertaker, so Taker enlists the help of his younger brother Kane to do his dirty work. Kane holds Stephanie on the edge of a balcony type area and threatens to drop her unless Commissioner Regal agrees to give The Undertaker the match against Triple H at WrestleMania. Some really great stuff there. Probably, you know, wouldn't fly in this day and age, but I mean, it's just wrestling, guys. It's just wrestling. Triple H also destroyed one of Taker's bikes heading into this just to make it even more personal on both sides. This match starts instantly with both men brawling in the aisleway as soon as Taker gets off his bike. This match was technically just a regular match, so, you know, disqualifications and countouts are a factor, but a lot of referee discretion here shown in what was basically a grudge match in a lot of ways. Referee Mike Chioda does a great job, you know, being in position in this one. One of the best referees of all time, really, is referee Mike Chioda. Chioda stops Triple H from using the trademark sledgehammer, which unfortunately puts Chioda in position to get taken out by Triple H when he is catapulted off an Undertaker reversal to the pedigree. This does allow Taker to hit a chokeslam, but with Chioda being momentarily rattled, gives Triple H a moment to be able to kick out of the chokeslam, which then pisses the Undertaker off, so the Undertaker drops a boot and an elbow, taking out the referee. So basically it is now a no DQ match, because if there's no official to uphold the rules, there is no rules. And this is where it starts to get interesting. This is where they battle into the crowd, up into the scaffolding. Triple H wears Undertaker out with a steel chair, but Triple H takes too long to hit that final shot. Triple H goozles him, grabs him by the throat, with a second chokeslam of the match at this point, chokeslams him off the scaffolding to the floor. The fans are absolutely loving it. We get a holy shit chance, and then just when you think it's done, just when you think the paramedics are going to come and, you know, take Triple H away because they're checking on him, Taker goes high risk and drops an elbow off the scaffolding onto Triple H, onto the floor, and then just for good measure, decides to deck the paramedics as well. Triple H is pinballed back through the crowd, courtesy of a series of punches from The Undertaker, and they make their way back into the ring. Taker looks to finish Triple H, but Chioda is still down from the assault from The Undertaker. Taker grabs the sledgehammer and Triple H is backing off, but he suckers Taker in. Triple H kicks Taker right between the uprights for a low blow. Triple H tries to use the sledgehammer himself. Taker blocks it and they have a back and forth slugfest. Taker hits the tombstone piledriver, but the referee is still down. He's unable to follow up. And then there's an absolutely brilliant false finish here. Chioda starts to stir. Undertaker goes for the last ride powerbomb. Triple H hits him with the sledgehammer as he's hoisted up, but Taker just manages to get the shoulder up. Taker gets some colour off of this. Triple H looks like he's in control, hammers away with the right hands in the corner, but Triple H gets too ahead of himself, gets a little bit too cocky, delivering the final shot. Taker pops up, hits the last ride, big pop there for Taker from his hometown Texas crowd. Taker speeds off on his bike, with blood pouring down his face in what is an absolutely badass shot. No pun intended there, but just it's a freaking awesome shot. And Triple H still looks strong in defeat. Brother. Number 5 versus Batista at Vengeance 2005 in a Hell in a Cell match. And this match here is the ultimate culmination of basically the entire Evolution saga, which started in 2003. So 2 years of story, give or take. At this point, Batista, he'd won the Royal Rumble. He went on to defeat Triple H at WrestleMania 21 to become the new World Heavyweight Champion. He then successfully defended the championship in their rematch at Backlash. And this is one of the better video packages for all of these matches, which says a lot when you think about it, because all of the video packages for the matches that do have video packages on this list are just fantastically done. I'm always a sucker for a good video package, and that's one thing that, regardless of, the WWE product over the years, their production values have always been top notch. But it goes back and it shows Batista eavesdropping on the conversation with Triple H and Ric Flair, where Triple H was basically bad-mouthing Batista, which is what the original trigger is for Batista choosing Triple H back at WrestleMania at that time frame, rather than choosing then WWE champion JBL. Of course, JBL lost his championship to John Cena to kind of usher in, a new era, so to speak, with Cena and Batista on top of their respective brand. After losing for a second time at Backlash, Triple H quits the WWE, quote unquote, and then walks out. Batista, of course, still showing, respect to his now former mentor Ric Flair on an episode of Raw where Triple H's music hits, makes a somewhat surprise return, or at least that was meant to be the intention, and Ric Flair low blows Batista. Triple H beats Batista down before laying down the initial challenge to this match. He had lost 2 straight to Batista, but in his mind there was no way he was losing the third, because at this point in time, Triple H was undefeated in Hell in a Cell matches. And then when you get to the actual match itself, you have Jim Ross, Jerry Lawler, and the coach, Jonathan Coachman, on commentary. All three did a great job of getting the narrative across, how dangerous this match can be, for a competitor's career in general. And Batista super, super over with the crowd in this time period. Of course, myself and Miss Crossfire talked about that recently on the pod as well, when talking about that time period. But on a personal level, this is one of my personal favourite matches for both of these guys, and possibly one of, if not my favourite, Hell in a Cell matches maybe ever, because hence why I preface, all of this as well by trying to say that, this list I try to be as unbiased as possible when doing these, but I do truly believe that this one does belong on this list. And I have actually talked about this match before briefly in the episode where I did with Ace Wags. This was originally, when we watched this, I think it was 10 or 11-year-old John when it happened. But yeah, Triple H goes to work early, making Batista taste and feel the steel, playing just as many mental games as physical. And as stated, Triple H very comfortable in this environment, a very new environment for Batista. Triple H uses a steel chain to hang Batista up on the ropes before Batista manages to battle back and whip Triple H with the chain. I always love the touch as well. The chain hits the steel steps on the outside after it's thrown away and just hits this massive booming thump sound just to prove that it is actually a real steel chain. Triple H gets used as a human battering ram, courtesy of 4 spinebusters from Batista back and forth between the ring post and the cell, beaten from pillar to post, as Jim Ross would say. I actually used that exact same spot more times than I can count back in the day as a kid when I was playing with my action figures with the Hell in a Cell playset. But I love watching it back too, because Triple H himself actually used that same spot on Shawn Michaels in the Hell in a Cell match that they'd had previously. So it was just some really, made Batista look very dominant, and was also very good storytelling in that, looked like Batista had kind of done his homework, so to speak, and then Triple H getting a taste of his own medicine. But Triple H turns the tide back in the ring with a trademark spinebuster of his own, the Arn Anderson style one that Triple H, of course, has perfected beautifully over the years, before introducing a barbed wire wrap steel chair. And this is what myself and Ace Wags are talking about. Triple H gets some beautiful colour after Triple H damn near gets his head taken off by Batista with a huge chair shot to the head with the barbed wire wrap chair, and then proceeds to grate Triple H's face on the cell wall. Batista hits a running power slam on Triple H onto the barbed wire wrap chair, and once again, as a kid, that was one of the most wild things that I'd see. Little did I know that a few years later I'd be able to take a deep dive into some classic ECW, and now here I am in this day and age watching full-blown deathmatch wrestling later in life. But Batista gets DDT'd on the barbed wire chair, and then he gets his face grated on the cell with a bit of revenge from Triple H. So now Batista has colour too. It is, interesting watching this back though, because I was watching on the network on my laptop, and I had my earphones in, and you can hear like the camera people talking to each other about the angles and telling each other to move out of the way and stuff, which is kind of funny. But Triple H uses his trademark sledgehammer Triple H goes to use the sledgehammer on a laying down prone Batista, but a bit of deja vu for Triple H. We have Batista kicking the Triple H in the uprights and pulls himself to his feet with the sledgehammer in his own hands. Triple H gets another close fall though, because unbeknownst to Batista as he was pulling himself to his feet, Triple H wrapped the chain around his hand and punched Batista's lights out. Well, not quite out because, as I said, he kicked out. But anywho, Triple H goes for a fist drop with the chain, but Batista gets the sledgehammer up into the throat of Triple H, and we get almost like a classic Triple H water spit spot, except that it's with blood, and it's just an awesome visual. And once again, commentary tells a fantastic job telling the story, doing their job, getting the story across with the two guys in the ring, of course, three, if you count referee Mike Chioda. Mike Chioda, a common theme here in a lot of these matches. And they were talking about how maybe the cell has kind of awoken the darker side of Batista. Maybe Batista is really becoming an actual animal, because, that was around the time frame he started being referred to commonly as the Animal Batista. But after a low blow and a pedigree from Triple H, Batista somehow manages to kick out. And I think as a kid, that was the first time I'd ever seen someone kick out of the pedigree. And I remember just losing my mind, and watching back, I kind of had like a little out-of-body experience. And I got a little bit of goosebumps watching it back and just hearing the passion from the fans in attendance, and then the commentary, especially from Jim Ross. Triple H looks for a second pedigree, this time on the steel steps, but Batista counters with a huge spinebuster onto the steel steps. Batista lifts Triple H up for the Batista bomb. Triple H has the sledgehammer in hand, but he just can't quite pull the trigger in time this time. No repeat of what happened with Taker at WrestleMania 17. Triple H gets drilled to the mat, courtesy of the Batista bomb. Batista retains the World Heavyweight Championship and goes 3-0 against Triple H, and on pay-per-view no less. Batista celebrates as the show goes off air, and Triple H is still laying in the ring, unconscious, with the sledgehammer still in his hand, which I just thought was an absolutely beautiful touch to end it. And again, I'm marking out for this match, so I may be biased, but I do truly feel that this match does belong on this list in this spot. Again, if you agree, disagree, let me know. Match number 4 versus Cactus Jack at No Way Out 2000. Hell in a Cell match. We had back-to-back Last Man Standing matches. Now we have back-to-back Hell in a Cell matches. My bad, but that's just Triple H is good at using, the props and the gimmicks and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this was another long-time rivalry at this point. Triple H, of course, had feuded with Mick Foley and two of the three faces of Foley and Mankind, and of course, Cactus Jack here. They had a couple of hardcore matches and street fights. They had a cage match in the Blue Bar Steel Cage a few years prior to this. But this was the first time, actually, that Triple H ever stepped foot inside the Hell in a Cell. Mick Foley, as Mankind, of course, has that, infamous Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker back in 1998, where, 2 years prior to this, which, it had a handful of moments, but everyone especially knows the throw off the top of the cell and the one through the cell. But the one off the cell, most wrestling fans can pretty much quote Jim Ross word for word from that moment. That, good God Almighty, he killed him. As God is my witness, he is broken in half. But, Triple H, he suckered Mick Foley, or Cactus Jack as he's competing here, into putting his entire career on the line in exchange for the WWF Championship. And Mick Foley then lures Triple H into his own domain here to somewhat even the playing field in a way. The story going into the match here is that Cactus Jack has told Triple H that he's gonna come off the cell again, but this time it's gonna be willing. He's gonna dive off the top of that cell. He's gonna land right on Triple H. He's gonna end Triple H for good, as well as his title reign, and yada yada yada. So the door has multiple chains locking it to keep them inside the structure. It's just a little bit cringy in some ways when you think about everything that Mick Foley's put himself through, regardless of which character he's been portraying, but, concussions and whatnot. But yeah, this is really where Triple H started to kind of show signs of how brutal he could actually be, of course, coming right off the back of the street fight that they had just had at the Royal Rumble. These two waste no time throwing each other all around the cell, going to work, back and forth, with a steel chair. Cactus Jack hits the double arm DDT early on the chair, but his brain had already been scrambled in such a short amount of time that he was already unable to capitalize on one of his biggest moves. Triple H looks to pedigree or perhaps even pile drive Cactus onto the steel steps on the outside of the ring, but Cactus Jack catapults Triple H into the cell. Triple H gets busted open early, and this is where it gets fun. Cactus Jack literally just lawn darts like a javelin, just launches the steel steps at the head of Triple H, but Triple H moves out of the way. The heavy steps hit the chain link wall fence that makes up the cell, and the chain link breaks. Cactus then launches Triple H into the train to, break it even more, and Cactus Jack makes himself a makeshift door, and they've gotten out of the cell just like Cactus Jack originally wanted. Cactus hits the Cactus Driver pile driver onto Triple H, onto the announce table, and then attempts to climb the cell to deliver on his promise of coming off the cell. But Stephanie McMahon Helmsley pulls Mick Foley off the side of the cell. The fans are ringing out chants of Foley, Foley, Foley at this point. And Foley pulls out a barbed wire wrap 2x4, and the fans go nuts. Triple H tries to escape, and at this point, there's only way he can possibly escape, and that's by climbing to the top of the cell itself. Cactus follows him up with the 2x4 still in hand. Cactus tosses the 2x4 up on top of the cell just to make the climb a little easier, a little quicker. But Triple H is able to use this to his advantage. He grabs it, uses the barbed wire to grind the face of Cactus. Cactus tumbles off the side, crashes through the announce table. Not quite as brutal as the previous, table bump with The Undertaker those couple of years ago, but still one hell of a fall. But Cactus manages to pull himself back to his feet while Triple H is posing on top of the cell. Cactus makes 3 failed attempts of trying to throw a steel chair up to the top of the cell before just abandoning it and climbing back up. We get a scary moment, though, where they're on top of the cell, and the cell kind of starts to break away in one of the corners, and Triple H almost falls through it and does a great job of making himself teeter to play it off and make it just that much worse. Cactus Jack suplexes and then double arm DDTs Triple H on top of the cell, and then you've got the big payoff. Cactus Jack grabs the barbed wire 2x4 once again, and then he pulls lighter fluid and lighter out of his tights. He sets it on fire. Cactus Jack looking to pile drive Triple H on top of the cell, on top of the flaming 2x4. But Triple H backdrops Cactus Jack through the roof of the cell. The ring breaks on impact. Luckily, this fall, unlike the Undertaker one, was actually planned, so everything was gigged appropriately, but it's still, again, one hell of a height to fall from, one absolutely insane bump that I myself in a million years would never think about taking. But by the time Triple H climbs down into the ring, the fans are ringing out holy shit chants, but Cactus Jack is starting to stir. He's still moving. Triple H cannot believe it, but he hits the pedigree, and he retains the WWF/WWE Championship. Cactus Jack refuses medical attention and limps out on his own accord and rides off into the sunset. Not really, because he'd literally just end up wrestling again for a few more years after this. He'd literally return the next month. But in that moment, for that time period, people truly believed that they were watching Mrs. Foley's baby boy for the last time. They thought he was done and dusted. It was a very bittersweet moment, but just wow, like that. While maybe not as memorable as the first, I guess, because it was the first, and that's the whole point of, the first time something's done is nearly always more memorable. But despite not being as memorable as, being tossed off the cell by Taker or through the cell by Taker, that backdrop through the cell from Triple H is still one moment that has been played over and over and over, and will probably continue to be played over and over and over, well after myself and all of you guys that are listening to this are gone. But before we get to the top 3 matches, I actually got through that a little bit quicker than I thought I was going to. Hopefully I'm not talking too fast. And as I said, I haven't even had any caffeine. I'm just kind of running on pure adrenaline at this point. But Before we get to the top 3 matches, I'll do some honourable mentions, and I've actually put 10 together. 10 honourable mentions in no particular order, since it is a top 10 list. I think when I did the Eddie Guerrero episode, I only had 9 honourable mentions, and it's literally bugged me ever since. But anyway, the honourable mentions for best matches of Triple H's career are versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 27, versus The Rock at Judgment Day 2000 in an Iron Man match, former match of the week here on Court and Conversation, by the way, Chris Jericho versus Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 18, versus Shawn Michaels at Armageddon 2002 in the 3 Stages of Hell. Shout out to Dylan Hardwood, who named this as the best Triple H match in his opinion. Versus Shawn Michaels Bad Blood 2004 Hell in a Cell match. Versus Ric Flair Taboo Tuesday 2005 Steel Cage match. Versus Shawn Michaels SummerSlam 2002 Unsanctioned match, a very popular match rather for people on the pod, as I've said. Just missed out on the top 10. It's pretty good, but I feel like it just misses out. But again, everyone's entitled to your opinion, but definitely an honourable mention regardless. Versus Chris Jericho at Judgment Day 2002 Hell in a Cell match. Versus Vince McMahon at Armageddon 1999. Maybe not the best match, but I think the match and the story paired together they just make it for me, at least in my opinion. And I know this one might be hard for some people to watch for obvious reasons, but if you can stomach it, it is a match I've talked about here on the pod a few times, and definitely what it was. But the last honourable mention is versus Shawn Michaels and Chris Benoit at WrestleMania 20 in the triple threat match. And some more fan, I hate saying fan, some more listener opinions. My mate Sean in Canada, shout out to Sean, he says that some of his favourites are Triple H versus The Rock, the ladder match at SummerSlam 1999 versus Cactus Jack at Royal Rumble 2000 versus Shawn Michaels SummerSlam 2002. As I said, a very popular one, it seems. And then with a wink and a smile, he said versus Shawn Michaels for the European title on whatever episode of Raw it was back in 1997. He argues that any of those could be considered the best as well. I'm assuming he didn't actually include the European Championship when he mentioned the best, but hey, it's all subjective. If you like a little parody of the finger poke of doom or whatever, then it is what it is. But back to the tail end of this list after those honourable mentions, counting down the top 3 in this top 10 Triple H matches. Number 3, the third best match in Triple H's career, in my opinion, and this is actually going to be the official match of the week because it is one of my personal favourite Triple H matches, and you're probably thinking, shouldn't number 1 be the match of the week? And yes, I did do that in the Eddie Guerrero top 10, and any other top 10s that I will do in the future will probably be the case as well, but the match that's number 1 on this list has already been match of the week before, so that's a little teaser for you for those that do listen regularly. But match number 3, the third best match of Triple H's career, in my opinion, and your match of the week for this week is going to be Triple H versus Stone Cold Steve Austin at No Way Out 2001, 3 Stages of Hell. And yeah, this is actually one of my personal favourite matches of Triple H, crack record, along with the Hell in a Cell match with Batista in 2005, and the triple threat match with The Rock and The Big Show in Survivor Series at 1999, which is one of my favourite matches, if not my favourite match of all time, along with TLC 2, and that, of course, had the whole drama of the who run over Stone Cold Steve Austin, but just a little fun fact there, if you will. As far as the actual match itself goes, this was initially dubbed as 2 out of 3 falls, but each fall had its own stipulation, basically making it 3 separate matches, hence how it eventually goes on to be dubbed 3 Stages of Hell. Very fitting, of course, for a blood feud like this one. Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H, notorious rivals. At one point, they actually became tag team champions as the 2-man power trip, which, funnily enough, was actually after all this happened, which in a way made that storyline better, because it was like people couldn't believe that both men would, sell their souls to work together before, Triple H tore his quad and then went on to come on to have that big, huge babyface return and win the Rumble in 2002 and then win the title and face Hogan and yada, yada, yada. But here we are in February of 2001, and this all dates back to November of 1999 at the Survivor Series with the aforementioned Who Ran Over Stone Cold angle that Triple H was revealed to be behind, but not before Rikishi, of course, claimed that he did it for The Rock. And then you fast forward from there to November 2000, Stone Cold's back. He wants Triple H's blood. And that event ends with Triple H lifting a car up that Triple H is actually inside of and flipping it with a forklift. I still have that event actually somewhere on VHS, the only wrestling VHS that I ever actually physically owned, and still own, by the way, but I always hired all the other ones I watched, and all the younger people right now have no idea what I'm talking about in terms of probably hiring movies from an actual shop or what VHSs are, but I'm old. Triple H makes it even more personal, though. Like, they've had all the crazy car stuff, and in the build-up to this match, where they're not allowed to touch each other, Triple H makes it more personal by hitting Jim Ross with the pedigree. JR, of course, very well documented to be a longtime friend of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And the video package before this match gives a quick run-through of all of this, but I kind of wanted to explain it in more detail. I got a bit jumbled. I did apologize. I'm having a little bit of trouble reading my notes as I've been going for almost an hour now, but before the match begins, you see Austin making his way to the ring when Michael Cole asks him, "Are you ready for hell?" To which Austin just walks away without saying a word. He's laser focused on the match. The first fall is a regular match, the second fall is a street fight, and the third fall, if necessary by God, is a steel cage match. Austin comes in like a house on fire, making it look like a street fight already. JR and King do a great job on commentary of, trying to convey that, and JR does a great job on commentary of trying to remain unbiased, but also subtly showing support for Austin as it goes along, which slowly becomes more and more unraveled the later it gets. Austin actually goes on to win the first fall after working on the left arm of Triple H and eventually hitting the Stone Cold Stunner after the usual back and forth, which was great because it looked, it's looked at as Triple H's wheelhouse in that time. So that then takes you to the street fight, which is, of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin's wheelhouse. And Triple H works on Austin's neck and his bad knees throughout both falls and goes on to pick up the second fall to even it up and take us to fall number 3, which, as mentioned, was a cage match. So both guys going tit for tat in a way, beating each other at their own game, no pun intended. Of course, Triple H being the game in this equation. The cage lowers, the ring is already littered with weapons from the street fight. You've got a couple of chairs, the sledgehammer, which Triple H had actually used along with the pedigree to get the second fall. A barbed wire 2x4 as a callback to that aforementioned Foley match. Both men are bleeding well and truly by this point. Triple H has crashed through the Spanish announce table in the previous fall. Austin's been bleeding significantly longer out of the two. And Triple H goes to work, instantly using the cage as a weapon against Austin very effectively. But Austin's able to turn the tide with the barbed wire on the 2x4 raking away at Triple H's face. And they just beat each other from pillar to post. The fans constantly on the edge of their seats, if not on their feet. Triple H hits a pedigree. Austin kicks out. Triple H looks for a second pedigree, or I guess the third one all up at this point. But Austin catapults Triple H into the cage, hits a stunner, isn't able to capitalize straight away, so Triple H kicks out, and then both men swing the 2x4 and the sledgehammer respectively, both knocking each other out, but as fate would have it, Triple H just so happens to land on top of Austin and picks up the win. And let me tell you, when I watched this back when I was about 11 or 12, maybe 13 at the latest on DVD, or hell, it may have actually been a VHS, I can't remember. But I was so pissed that Triple H somehow found a way to win this match, which is kind of funny to me because obviously as I grew up and, Triple H became one of my heroes. But Austin hits a stunner after the match to show that this still isn't over before crawling out of the ring and limping backstage. Stone Cold actually had his disturbed version of his theme song here, which is always absolutely freaking dope. But just a reminder that was your match of the week as well, which is Triple H versus Stone Cold Steve Austin at No Way Out 2001. The official match of the week. Of course, you should check out all of these matches. But number 2, we're getting close, guys. We're getting close. The second best match in Triple H's career, in my opinion, versus The Undertaker, WrestleMania 28, Hell in a Cell, end of an era. Shout out to Suplex GM Timothy Wilkes. I know that, me and my rogues have a little bit of an issue with the Wilkes Talent Factory, but for the sake of this episode, he named this match and the street fight against Cactus Jack at the 2000 Royal Rumble as his favourite / best. Shout out to Kyle Eade as well. He mentioned this match as well as the other two matches that Triple H and The Undertaker had at 17 and 27 respectively. This was actually the very first WrestleMania that I ever got to watch live, and shout out to Margie. I watched WrestleMania 28 and 29 respectively at her house, and Ace Wags was there as well. I remember this one being a very interesting one because I was very much in favour of cheering The Undertaker, and Margie very much in favour for Triple H, and Ace Wags was kind of just going back and forth in the middle, marking out for everything. I mean, we're all marking out, and we still do, but just a fantastic match to watch back. That's one of those ones that, this is going to be a timeless classic, this match, in my opinion, for everything that, it really stood for. But as mentioned, this is the third and final match that these two would have had at WrestleMania. Named the end of an era, and in a lot of ways it was. This match, in a lot of ways, was a stamp on what was known as, the Attitude Era back in the 90s, an era that obviously a lot of, a majority of wrestling fans look back on as the best ever. I personally still think, quality-wise, that the Ruthless Aggression era was just a little bit better from an action and overall product standpoint, but certainly wrestling will never be bigger than it was in the mid to late 90s into the early 2000s. Of course, 2001, WrestleMania 17, in their first match against each other that I talked about earlier on the list, that WrestleMania is looked at as being the greatest WrestleMania ever. But here we are, fast forward all the way to 2012. In the past 3 years at the WrestleMania, Undertaker has faced Shawn Michaels at 2 of those and subsequently retired Shawn at WrestleMania 26 and 2010. That leads to WrestleMania 27 in 2011, with Triple H kind of wanting revenge for that in a way, and he himself gets beaten, but became so close that he, much like Shawn did years prior, finds himself kind of consumed with wanting to break The Undertaker's undefeated streak. Of course, Taker's career overall ended with him being 23-2 at WrestleMania, but at this point, he was 19-0. Shawn Michaels finds his way into this angle, becomes the special guest referee, which creates even more drama in its own right. On one hand, Triple H is Shawn's best friend, but does Shawn get jealous if Triple H ends up doing what he couldn't? Or does he want to just stick it to The Undertaker and he wants to have a hand in ending the streak regardless? It was a lot of, drama, wrestling, whatever, but it's great stuff. And Shawn has an interview pre-match teasing that exact same thing just to stir the pot even more right before things are about to kick off. Jim Ross gets his own special entrance for this match. It was a special request from The Undertaker and Triple H. They wanted Jim Ross on commentary here to really solidify the fact that this really was, the end of an era. No video package before this match, but there was a fantastic mini bit in the overall opening package to the entire event that's really good. Shawn Michaels does his classic entrance while commentary talks about the importance of this match with Taker and Shawn and what it means, with Taker and Triple H and what it means for Shawn being the referee in this situation. Triple H makes his entrance with what I'd almost describe as like a Castle Grayskull type of vibes for the He-Man fans out there. And Taker, obviously, by this point had, mastered his iconic, some say drawn-out entrance, but it still gives me goosebumps no matter how many times I see it. And this is where Taker actually debuts the short, shaved hair look with the semi-fade and the mohawk on top. And then we have another entrance. The Cell has its own entrance, so to speak, and as it lowers, the sounds of Metallica ring out. They're playing The Memory Remains, pretty fitting for what is being dubbed, as the end of an era. Both men bounce each other around the Cell very early, almost instantly, in what is actually only a handful of times that the actual Cell itself, is really used. And some say the Cell being involved in the grand scheme of things might have actually been overkill or really unnecessary in a way, and I kind of agree, but these men are well documented, both masters of this stipulation, so I think in a way they almost did it just to say that they'd faced each other in that structure, because of course both men 1 and 2 for the most Hell in a Cell matches ever, and funnily enough, Batista, who I was talking about before, he only had 2 Hell in a Cell matches in his career, and they were both victories over these two guys here, and Taker's actually faced 3 of the 4 members of Evolution in this structure. Of course, he faced Orton in 05 and Armageddon in the Cell as well. And it's actually surprising looking back on the career of Triple H that Triple H and Orton never faced off in that cell as well, as a side note, but it's my ADHD catching up. But of course, back to the actual match itself. So it's a little cool tidbit that all three men involved here, with Triple H, Taker, and Shawn as the referee, all three have had cell matches against each other at one point or another. Of course, Taker and Shawn, first ever Hell in a Cell match. Triple H and Shawn, I believe, still hold the record for the longest Hell in a Cell match in history. And now here we are with Triple H versus The Undertaker in Hell in a Cell. They waste no time breaking out the gimmicks. One of the first biggest spots of the match is Triple H looks to pedigree The Undertaker on the steel steps in the ring early, but Taker hits a big back body drop off the steps to the mat, and then Triple H responds with a spinebuster to Taker on the steps with what is a very sickening thud, especially when you consider the state that, The Undertaker's body was in the year prior at WrestleMania. Shawn Michaels plays his part perfectly when Triple H is wearing Taker out with a steel chair, and Shawn, even as the referee, is begging Triple H to just pin him, and Triple H gets in Shawn's face, telling him to call it off then. He's the referee, he has the power. He says, "End it, or I will," to which Taker barks at Shawn, "Don't stop it." Triple H covers The Undertaker, but after a long drawn-out 2 count, Taker manages to roll his shoulder up while Jim Ross wonders on commentary, what does Triple H have to do if he does want to end the streak? And right on cue, Triple H pulls out the trademark sledgehammer while Shawn begs Taker to please let me ring the bell. Triple H clobbers Taker with the sledgehammer, but the streak somehow momentarily stays intact. Shawn actually takes the sledgehammer away from Triple H while lining Taker up for another shot, and Shawn looks like he's about to ring the bell on behalf of Triple H in what is almost like a TKO fashion type of thing against Taker. And out of instinct, Taker locks Shawn in the Hell's Gate, causing Shawn to pass out. We get a back and forth with Triple H and Taker. No referee in this situation. Triple H passes out to the Hell's Gate as well. But again, no referee to call it. This prompts referee Charles Robinson to enter the cell as Triple H kicks out of a chokeslam, so Charles Robinson gets a chokeslam of his own out of frustration. But right as Taker goes for a tombstone on Triple H, Shawn Michaels pulls himself to his feet, and we get that iconic moment. Shawn Michaels delivers the super kick, the sweet chin music, out of anger, followed by a pedigree from Triple H in what is still one of the best false finishes I've ever seen. And then Shawn shows a very wide range of mixed emotions after Taker kicks out. And Triple H even throws Shawn out of the ring in frustration, pushes him over before feeling the wrath of the trademark Undertaker comeback. But Triple H kicks out just as close, if not closer, than Taker did moments before. Both guys had to use each other respectively to get back to their feet, but then they continue to slug it out before Taker manages to kick out of a second pedigree. But with a bit of deja vu from earlier in the match, it's now Undertaker's turn. He wears Triple H out with a steel chair, but much like Undertaker early on, Triple H just manages to roll the shoulder up. In one last act of defiance, Triple H tells The Undertaker to suck it before it's Undertaker taking out Triple H with the sledgehammer, delivers one final tombstone piledriver. He gets the win. He's 20-0, and I got goosebumps watching this back like I was watching it in real time. And then, of course, you get that amazing moment. Everyone's beaten, battered, bruised. We've just witnessed what they advertised as the end of an era. All three guys, Triple H, Taker, Shawn, after a few minutes, it was only a few minutes, but it honestly felt like ages, almost like time kind of stood still. They make their way to the end of the ramp. They stand arm in arm in what has become an absolutely classic photo. Both guys, honestly, could have just retired then and there, and it would have been, a storybook ending for both Triple H and, Undertaker. And obviously having Shawn, who'd previously retired as the referee, wrapped it up in a neat little bow. But nonetheless, they both continued, and as a fan, I'm kind of, glad they did, because, they weren't done just yet. But yeah, they could have retired there, and it would have been all fine and dandy. But, ladies and gentlemen, it is now that time. Drum roll, please. I don't know why, of all the sounds that my soundboard has, it doesn't have a drum roll effect. But Since this is a Triple H episode, I'll go into number one by saying this. Are you ready? I know I already made that joke at the start of the episode, but look, it is what it is. It is time for the best match in the career of Triple H. Again, just my opinion. Right, by now some of you have probably guessed what it is, but number one versus Cactus Jack, Royal Rumble 2000 in a street fight. The build up to this was absolutely fantastic, and here we go again with another amazing video package showing us just how we got here. Triple H had recently regained the WWF Championship by defeating then-champion The Big Show. The McMahon-Helmsley regime had fired Mick Foley / Mankind, and then thanks to all the other wrestlers threatening to walk out, they are forced to rehire Foley, and this leads to one of the best Foley promos and great reactions from Triple H. Triple H beat Mankind down, and being down and battered, we then witness the transformation from Mankind back into and the return of Cactus Jack. And much like the end of an era I was just talking about, this still gives me goosebumps to see, no matter how many times I watch it in reference to the promo, but obviously the match itself as well. This match is everything you would expect and more from a Mick Foley / Cactus Jack match, and this really raised Triple H's stock even further, which honestly seemed to be a common theme in the career of Mick Foley when you look at people like The Rock, Randy Orton, and Edge, respectively. Stephanie McMahon Helmsley, as she was known in that time period, went backstage before the match even began, which did a brilliant job of selling just how dangerous and brutal this was about to be. And Triple H, almost the underdog here, he's even as the heel and as the champion on top of that. The majority just wanted to see Cactus just beat the absolute heck out of Triple H, and at the end of the day, they got just that. We waste no time. Cactus Jack hits a swinging neckbreaker on Triple H on the floor. We get a sickening chair shot from Triple H to Cactus Jack that Jim Ross described on commentary as vile. It's really hard to go super into detail for this one, which is kind of annoying because, you know, it is the number one match in my opinion, but there's just so much fuckery, as I like to say, and honestly, this one was super hard to separate the mark in me from the half-assed wannabe journalist. They brawl into the crowd. Triple H gets a massive gash in the back of his leg after taking a suplex onto a wooden pallet, which was part of the entranceway props. Foley pile drives Triple H on the announce table with another sickening thud. They both just beat the ever-loving crap out of it, and it's absolutely fantastic. Triple H gets a beautiful amount of colour. There's a point near the end where it looks like Triple H is going to just go backstage and try and escape the match, only to be met with a right hand from The Rock, who makes a brief appearance at the entranceway. Cactus Jack gets backdropped into some thumbtacks, but still manages to kick out of that following a pedigree. Foley takes one of the most scary bumps I've ever seen, still to this day, with the pedigree into the thumbtacks, which someone who has eye problems makes me cringe, but in the words of Foley himself, I could lose an eye, but think of the pop. But yeah, just someone that has eye issues for me, and just like, no, dude. Please no. Like, I know it was 22 years ago at this point, almost 23 years ago at this point, but it's still, every time I see it, it still makes me cringe, and by some miracle, he escaped without any, injury, but Triple H retains the championship off the pedigree and the tax, but Cactus isn't done there. Triple H actually carted out on a stretcher, but Cactus runs after him and pushes past the medics, pushes past the referees, runs the stretcher back out to the ring, and takes out Triple H with one final shot from the barbed wire 2x4, just to make a statement and to a big pop from the crowd. Crowd solid behind Cactus all the way through with this one. I know it might seem a little bit anticlimactic to kind of condense the one that I believe is at the top of the list more than the rest, but honestly, I feel like the match also, in a way, kind of speaks for itself, and to be honest, I have also talked about this match a handful of times on the podcast. Of course, Mrs. Crossfire said that this is probably her favourite match of all time, so I didn't really want to beat a dead horse, so to speak, but I wholeheartedly believe that this is the best match in the career of Triple H. But as always, let me know your opinions. But that's going to bring me to a close. I'm hoping that, my voice didn't bore you too much. I put a lot of effort into this episode. So I really, really do hope that you guys enjoyed it. But as I've said a few times, hit me up on the socials available in the link tree below with your own respective lists. Of course, the merch and Amazon wishlist are in those links as well. I actually have a new Cactus Jack-esque shirt mixed with a little bit of Red Dead Redemption vibes coming out soon. It'll hopefully be out by the time this episode drops, fingers crossed. But just to quickly recap the top 10 matches, they were number 10 versus Hulk Hogan at Backlash 2002, number 9 versus John Cena at WrestleMania 22, number 8 versus Ric Flair in a Last Man Standing match at Survivor Series 2005, number 7 versus Shawn Michaels in a Last Man Standing match at Royal Rumble 2004, number 6 versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 17, number 5 versus Batista in Hell in a Cell at Vengeance 2005, number 4 versus Cactus Jack in Hell in a Cell at No Way Out 2000, number 3 versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in 3 Stages of Hell at No Way Out 2001, which, as I said, is your official match of the week, but definitely check out most, if not all of these, including the honourable mentions from earlier on if you can. Number 2 versus The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell match in the end of an era at WrestleMania 28, and of course, number 1, the best match in Triple H's career, just to recap, I truly believe, is versus Cactus Jack in a street fight at Royal Rumble 2000. And it seems to be a common theme, as I said earlier on, that Triple H is, a master of using any and all props that are at his disposal. So I guess it's only fitting that a lot of these are, gimmick matches or stipulation type matches. The song of the week this week, as I said at the start of the episode, was Ace of Spades by Motorhead. ICW Australia will be presenting Southside Bash in Tuggeranong for my friends in the ACT and surrounding areas in a week's time, or I guess 6 days' time if you're listening to this on a date it initially drops. Of course, check the description for the link to that event, as well as the Insane Rumble coming up in early November. I know I sound like a crack record when I say this, but thank you guys so much for continuing to come on this journey with me and continuing to listen and give me your feedback. I really, truly do appreciate it. I am the essential John L. Crossfire, and you were just caught in conversation. Time to play the game! Do 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 do.